In today's video, which is our final video for 2021, we take a look at the latest NHL trade rumors involving teams like the Oilers, the Habs, the Rangers, as well as a couple of goaltenders who could find themselves on the move early into the new year. Plus, we have more games postponed again. All that coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today is December the 31st, 2021, the final day of the year. I certainly want to wish everybody a happy new year. I hope everybody has a safe and happy start to the 2022 with the holiday. It's been one heck of a year. Obviously, we're still battling COVID. It's not gone. We're still going to be dealing with this for a while. We're seeing record cases across Canada and the United States, although it does seem like both countries have a very different approach to handling things right now. When it comes to the hockey world, we're seeing empty arenas in the NHL. More games have been postponed, mainly due to the fact that there is a lot of capacity restrictions in Canada and Canadian arenas right now, with most places in different provinces only allowing either at most 50% capacity, which would be 7,000 to 8,000. I'm not even sure if there's any places left with that anymore. Some are allowing no fans, some are around 1,000. So it's very, very different scenarios. Meanwhile, you turn on, either a hockey game or any other sports in the U.S. and you're seeing full stadiums, especially when it comes to college sports and NFL and things like that, much larger stadiums with way bigger crowds. It's a completely different story. So very, very different worlds right now, even though the two countries normally are a lot alike and do have a fair bit in common, being neighbors and all the similarities, but very different story right now. So we'll see a whole bunch more games that were announced postponed. For example, the Islanders had a whole trip plan going through parts of Western U.S. and into through Western Canada. They canceled the entire trip today. Mainly due to the fact that there were so many games in the Canadian cities that they want to hold off. Now, there's going to be significant challenges with this. I understand for the first half of January, maybe even later, they don't want to play games in Canada if they can help it. That's going to be almost a zero. I'm not even sure. I know there's going to be a game tomorrow between the Senators and the Leafs in Toronto. After that, I'm not really aware of any games for a while, and they're trying to avoid playing them and postponing them, obviously, because it all boils down to money here. As we know, the NHL, at the end of the day, is a business. They've lost a lot throughout the pandemic. They don't want to really, lose more. So if they can do these games at a later date when they can have more fans, hopefully full arenas in the building, makes a big difference when it comes to dollars and cents. So at the end of the day, we'll see. But at the end of the day here, if you look at all the games that have been postponed in Canada to do that many home games over the course of, say, February, March, it's going to be really challenging, considering that at this point, at least, we're not expecting the NHL to extend the season. But I wonder if they might have to. It's really hard to say. Or will they have to play a shortened season? It's going to be a challenge at this rate to get all teams in with an 82-game schedule. We saw the isolation requirement dropped in the U.S. by the CDC to 5 days. Many Canadian places have already adopted that. I would imagine within the near future, most, if not all places will as well. So at least it seems to be a fairly level playing field. I don't know that Quebec has done that. At least I'm not completely sure on that. So that might impact Montreal. But I know Ontario has made the adjustment. And I believe some of the western provinces has as well. I know on the East Coast where I am, we have too. Of course, we don't have an NHL team right here. But still, at least it's being reduced to impact things in a more positive way. So we'll see where all this goes, but certainly lots to remember about 2021, and let's just hope that 2022 is not another calendar year dominated by COVID. Now, of course, one other thing we want to mention as well, Sean Couturier, the Flyers, obviously their top center iceman is out week to week with an upper body injury here as well. So that's certainly a big blow for them. We've seen lots of other players mostly due to COVID protocol, but of course there are some, legit injuries here too. More players, of course, were added to COVID protocol again today, which is not a surprise. More released. Like the Leafs are getting closer to getting back to a full team, but even then, a lot of these guys have been out for an extended time. They'll need a few practices probably before they get into game action here. So we'll see, and hopefully the new year with all the adjusted protocols and everything, hopefully we'll see players in it for shorter periods of time. It won't be such an impact if we can get these games played and try our best to get through this current NHL season. Now, on to the trade talk here for today. Of course, there's a few teams we want to focus on, mainly the Rangers, Oilers, and Habs, and a couple goalies that we want to look at here as well. This is kind of summarize some of the top trade rumors that we've seen more recently that will likely play out here into the new year ahead of the March NHL trade deadline. Now, the two goalies we want to keep an eye on here, and I think there's a good chance we could see one or both of these guys traded not too early into the new year, not too late into the new year. So like in the not too distant future would be Marc-Andre Fleury in Chicago and Joonas Korpisalo with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, of course, between the two, Fleury has a little bit more say in where he goes due to the trade protection in his contract, where Korpisalo doesn't have that luxury. But still, a few teams that I would probably peg as keeping an eye on here would be the Oilers for starters, maybe the Avalanche, and they're not the only ones on there, but to me, they're two of the more likely teams that would consider making a goaltender move. And the reason I suggest it's probably not going to happen too far into the future, if they're going to do it, that is because you don't usually see a lot of goaltender moves right at the deadline. It takes them a little bit longer to get acclimated with their new team and obviously to work with the defense and just to kind of be more in sync there. Teams usually adding goalies want to get ahead of the curve here a little bit and do it a little bit sooner so they have more time to get adjusted and be ready to go when they get to the playoffs. Either way, both of these goalies are pretty unlikely to return to their existing teams next year. Korpisalo, of course, is probably the odd man out there, with Elvis being the main player to take the goaltending job in Columbus, and of course Fleury being a pending unrestricted free agent, likely doesn't return to Chicago. We don't know what Fleury's future plans are yet. He hasn't really said much publicly. If he continues to play, will he want a challenge for his Stanley Cup? If so, that's probably not going to happen in Chicago. What will his family want to do? It's kind of up in the air. Some feel a return to Pittsburgh is inevitable, but if Tristan Jarry continues to play well, would Fleury return and be content with a 1A, 1B scenario in Pittsburgh? Like, obviously that's what he was part of when he ended up departing the Penguins, but Matt Murray was taking the job there as a starting goaltender. So we'll see, depending on what stage of his career and how he feels about everything, where it all ends up. But these two goaltenders, certainly the main ones you could see when it comes to at least bigger names being on the move here early in 2022. Now, of course, one name we want to take a look at here as well is Thomas Hertl and potential of the New York Rangers being an excellent fit. In a recent article for The Athletic, writer Arthur Staple, who now covers the Rangers, used to cover the Islanders here, talks about a variety of options for the Rangers, considering if they're still performing at a high level, heading towards the deadline, going into the playoffs, I feel there's a pretty good chance here that they will indeed add at the deadline, and Hertl might be one of the top guys for them to take a look at. Of course, it factors in the possibility of using their first-round pick as trade bait, and I would suggest that the teams in the upper half of the NHL standings right now that would be picking in the bottom half of the NHL draft, I personally think there's a decent chance they will consider moving their 2022 first-round picks. Now that we've had more of a chance to evaluate this 2022 NHL draft, I'm not so sure that it's quite as deep as we might have originally thought. There's lots of good, talented players there, don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure that there's that elite-level talent like some might have thought a few years back. So I think there's a better chance that teams would be more willing to kind of hoard their picks for next year and possibly consider trading them for 2022. And obviously the Rangers, if they have a shot at going forward, if they're going to be picking, say anywhere from 20 to 30, why not take that chance if you feel like your team is good enough and you want to add the help along the way to give it a shot at going for the Stanley Cup. So Thomas Hertl is a prime candidate that they'd be, would consider doing that. Would they consider re-signing him? That might be very challenging given their current cap situation. I don't know that that's a real possibility. So they have to be content with a, kind of like a one and done approach here where you rent him for the rest of the season and that he's, 99% not coming back. So to me, that does make a lot of sense. They would target a player of him. He's pretty versatile. He's normally a centerman, but he's played a fair bit of wing in his career too, so you can put him in a variety of different spots there. Given the fact they have Zibanejad and Strome, they don't necessarily have to play Hertl at center. You can never have too many centermen anyhow. And of course, between the Hertl and Strome, one of them could end up playing on the third line, which just makes the team that much deeper and stronger. Anyway, given Strome's, strong, connection with Artemi Panarin over the last few years, they might not want to move him out of that number 2 spot. Hertl might be a number 3 guy, but really, if Thomas Hertl is your number 3 center, you're a pretty deep team. And at the same time, though, it might make more sense for him to play more of a top 6 wing position with the injury to Sammy Blais. They've had some different options going on in that top 6 area. They might not want to rely on a younger player, like a Julien Gauthier, for example, or anybody else in that kind of role. They might want more experienced guys who've been, not only experienced in regular season play, but has a decent amount of playoff games under his belt and some long playoff runs too. Thomas Hertl's learned a lot in San Jose about what it takes to win. It might be a terrific fit there, and a first-round pick to San Jose might really help them with their future needs. and help the Rangers on a short-term basis. So to me, there's a good match there. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it is a deal that I feel makes sense. And with the rumors out there that the Rangers would have interest, it does make sense. When it comes to another player on the Rangers that is many feel is pretty likely to be moved, that's goalie Alex Georgiev in a backup role. And as much as I do feel like he doesn't have a long future with the Rangers, I personally am going to say that I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think they're going to ride out with Igor Shesterkin and Georgiev going into the playoffs and deal with that in the offseason. I would say next year they're likely going to have a different tandem. But for right now, I don't think the Rangers really want to mess really with their goaltending. I'm not sure that there's really a lot out there from a cap perspective. I mean, they can't really take on more money in that position. So if you look at the goalies that could possibly be available that would make the same money or less, I just don't know that you're really going to find a better fit than what you already have. So to me, I don't think it's likely he gets moved. You never know. Things could change. But right now, I think he likely stays, and they deal with that in the offseason. Now, when it comes to the Edmonton Oilers, we've heard numerous rumors about their trade discussions with the Arizona Coyotes. They apparently had a lot of interest in top defenseman Jacob Chychrun. Now, that might be really difficult to pull off, and I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to see it. You never know, but I just don't see the Oilers paying that massive price that the Coyotes are going to be looking for, but they've also been linked to winger Phil Kessel. Of course, we've seen them today in the last couple of games here since the Mike Smith return, prove that they might really want to seriously consider a goaltending change as well. Of course, Smith has played okay in the last few games, but he's very inconsistent. He'll make some huge saves, and then he'll let in a goal he should have had. You can tell he's had an extended period of time not playing, and hopefully that'll get better once he gets a chance to play a little bit more and get some rhythm going. But given the fact that the Oilers' goaltending has been their Achilles heel in the playoffs before, and the way Koskinen has played, and then he kind of fizzled out here, if Smith has a hard time finding a groove and getting that down consistently, I think that the Oilers are pretty likely going to shift to goaltending help, and they may not be able to add when it comes to another winger or defenseman on for some extra depth there that they would probably prefer to do. I mean, they'd probably like to add in a variety of ways here if they could, but it's going to be very challenging and almost impossible to do it all. And if they need that steady goaltending performance, so that they don't necessarily need to do that. But if they feel like they do, that will impact the rest of their options on what they can do here. But if Mike Smith can find his game and they can focus on other things, Phil Kessel makes a lot of sense. He's done nothing but win in his career, been an excellent complementary piece along the way, still putting up good points on a really bad Coyotes team. So to me, it makes a ton of sense that they would consider that kind of veteran winger to bring in who can play a top 6 or top 9 role for Edmonton. He's used to playing with guys like Crosby and Malkin, etc. Like, he knows what it takes. I can see him playing when it comes to like on a line with McDavid or Draisaitl, where some of their other wingers like a Yamamoto, who had a really good game today, but has been inconsistent throughout the last year plus, they might be able to get a better consistent performance out of Kessel. I'm not sure that Yamamoto would necessarily be the trade piece going back, but the Coyotes are certainly going to be asking for younger prospect or type of player. So would it be Yamamoto? Maybe they might have to part with, or one of the variety of interesting prospects on New Oilers. I'm not sure they're going to want to move a guy like Broberg, for example, who's arguably their top prospect. They got Bouchard on the blue line finally taking on a solid role. Would they want to look at maybe a guy like Samorukov or somebody else? They do have some other younger players that might interest other players, like Lavoie's another one. I don't know exactly what it would take to land Kessel. I don't think that would be a huge asking price, but the price might have to go up if you expect the Coyotes to retain salary, and most teams are going to need them to do that given where his cap hit is. So we'll see where it goes, but Kessel could be a good fit with the Oilers here ahead of the March deadline as well. And lastly, I want to look at the Montreal Canadiens, and we've had a series of articles from the Canadian beat writers for Sportsnet making predictions about the Canadian teams they cover heading into next year, into 2022, and Eric Engels of Sportsnet made a few predictions here for Montreal. One of them being the fact that they do land the first overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft, which is expected and supposed to be held in Montreal. Hopefully they can actually have a draft in person this year, not do it virtually like we've seen recently. That's not really the same sort of atmosphere, and it just doesn't really jive. I mean, obviously it's an event that produces a lot of revenue as well, so just from a lot of variety of standpoints, hopefully it can happen in its traditional format. But Engels goes on to predict that two players that have been mentioned a lot in trade rumors, one won't be traded and the other one likely will be. The one not would be Brendan Gallagher, given the fact of where his contract is at. Even though there's going to be interest, the Habs are going to have to retain salary to make that work. I think Gallagher would get a ton of interest, and I would agree with this, that he'll have a lot of interest at $3.5 to $4 million, but at 6.5, he's not really showing the signs of still being that 30-goal guy. He's gone through a ton of injuries. He gets hurt a lot because of the way he plays. Certainly a guy who's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. Scrappy little guy. Certainly goes hard to the net. And because of how he plays, he does get a fair bit of bumps and bruises and had dealt with a lot of injuries over the years. Since he signed that contract, he's shown signs of decline. Like, he's not necessarily the same guy he used to be. Now, could he go to a new team, get a fresh start, be rejuvenated with some new higher-end line mates, and maybe refine that 20 to 30 goal scoring touch? Certainly a possibility. I just don't think teams are going to touch it at $6.5 million. So if Montreal wants to retain a couple $1 million in salary for like 5 more years, which I'm not sure they're going to want to do, then that's going to be what it takes to get a deal done. So I agree with Engel's analogy here that it's probably not going to happen, at least not yet. And now a little bit further into the future is a little less term on that contract, more likely, or if it did happen, the offseason is certainly more likely when teams have more cap flexibility. But the other player he does think is a much more likely to move, which would make a lot of sense, would be Tyler Toffoli, who's in the second year of a 4-year deal, only making it $4 million, a lot more easier to manage when it comes to many teams around the league. And he's got a ton of experience. He's not overly old. He doesn't have a ton of term left, and it's a lot more reasonable. He's got a lot of experience from his time in LA. Obviously, his Stanley Cup to his name. Went to the Stanley Cup Finals with Montreal last year. Had a heck of a year last year as well. Being on fire in the regular season. Did tail off a little bit in the playoffs, but still scored some key goals and was a key contributor to their Stanley Cup run here. And Toffoli still has a lot left in the tank. I think a lot of teams would have a lot of interest in adding him at the deadline, and it could help Montreal regain some more younger assets or prospect picks or draft picks or whatever for their future as well. Certainly they're going to have to go through a bit of a retool. How much that's going to be or how much of a rebuild it's going to be, still unknown, as we don't know the full clear path and plan here yet of new president of hockey operations Jeff Gorton as they continue their search to determine who will be the next general manager of the team here as well. We'll probably get a much better feel of where this team and direction is going here over the next couple of months as we see Gorton start to leave his mark and make some of the decisions necessary to move this team forward. But to me, Toffoli definitely will get a lot of attention because of that contract alone, and experience will be attractive to a lot of teams heading into the 21-22 Stanley Cup playoffs. So that is all your news and rumors here for today. Again, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you very much for all your continued support through the entire calendar year of 2021. It's been a heck of a ride. We've seen a lot of growth in the channel. The subscriber count's gone way up. We've had a lot of merchandise sales, which I really help support things, which I cannot thank you enough. I really hope 2022 brings us all much greater times. I hope we can move on from this pandemic, kind of regain what we used to call normalcy in life, get back to doing a lot of things that we all love to do. I hope you all have a safe and happy new year, and we'll catch you in 2022.